Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon to everyone. And I just wanted to, first of all, just get everyone's attention and have them look at those mangrove stands that is in my front slide. But as I move on to the next slide, I just wanted to do a quick introduction of myself. I'm Rashema Ingraham, the Executive Director of Waterkeepers Bahamas. And for anyone that would like to reach out after this presentation to ask any questions, you can go ahead and take a screenshot of that. So, as it is widely known, the islands of Grand Bahama and Abaco in the Bahamas were hugely impacted during the passage of Hurricane Dorian. And as a result of the damages caused by the hurricane, a large portion of the mangrove forest area was inundated with salt water for an extensive period of time, much longer than the mangroves had been accustomed to. So, the picture here shows the actual state of the mangroves prior to the storm in 2022. And the photo that I showed in the beginning is the state of the mangroves after the storm in 2020. And so the damage to the Dover Sound area really challenged a group of nonprofits and CSOs to come together to collectively work on a restoration project for Dover Sound. Waterkeepers included partners like Earth Care, Blue Action Lab, Coral Vita, Save the Bays to work on the development of mangrove restoration procedures, as well as a community-based guide, and one of the first of its kind for the country, especially since there had been no mangrove restoration projects that would have taken place in the country as a result of hurricane impact, okay? Hurricane impact or damages. I want to point out again that prior to Hurricane Dorian, Dover Sound was a lively area, very diverse. The mangrove forest had residents like turtles, sharks, birds, a collection of birds, and then the three types of mangroves, including the buttonwood. And then it was also known as an eco-tourist hub, as well as a fishing hub. So the focus on restoration to mobilize the area to bring that back was very important for the partners. Additionally, we looked at the three pillars, and so these are the three pillars for any type of community involvement that we wanted to really filter into this project. We were establishing the restoration project with these pillars in mind. The first, of course, is mangrove restoration for the area, but for it to lead a stronger community engagement and expand into workforce development, really getting the community involved to build awareness of mangrove importance, as well as including them in all steps of restoration, and introduce the workforce development aspect as we move closer and closer into the project. And then finally, the ongoing mangrove harvesting. And this is very important as for us, it was a clear setback as we had set out to do the restoration because there was a limited supply of seeds within country to mobilize restoration as soon as it was needed. Looking at the network of individuals that we saw to engage as the community project, these are the four pieces of the puzzle. The first would have been the citizens and the residents who would have been on the ground, providing feedback, helping at the nurseries and during outplanting exercises. So the citizens and residents were key, but we also needed them to help to create a sense of awareness for mangrove importance on the island of Grand Bahama. And two, most importantly for us is the government and other government agencies or sectors who will be enforcers of the law, as well as the developers of future policy around mangrove protection in the country. Three, tourists or visitors or related businesses that accommodate visitors, especially those who were building experiences around our natural resources. And then finally, and fourth, the international agencies, whether these agencies would have been funders like foundations or corporate sponsors, or agencies who were developing global policies on mangrove protection. So when we were building out this restoration project, we knew that we needed to reach these individuals or stakeholders in the community of mangrove restoration, as we would call it. So as we move on, it is important for me to note that prior to Hurricane Dorian, there had been several studies that were done on ecosystem services, with mangroves being the main ecosystem. These studies either focused on the entire Bahamian region or were specific to islands like Andros, Eleuthera, New Providence, Abaco, or Exuma. There had not been a specific project or report focusing on Grand Bahama Island. However, this map here shows or gives a visual guide for the Bahamas National Hazard Analysis and shows the role of mangroves in reducing risk to coastal communities. And that you understand and see mangrove forest on the north shore of Grand Bahama. And the brown bordering shows that there is a heavy need for mangrove presence to aid in the reduction of risk to coastal communities. So for such a large area to be impacted, resulted in the loss of its mangrove forest along this northern area, shows now the vulnerability of the island to any future storms or surges or etc. One of the things that we did for a long period of time was we went out into the Dover Sound area, which is on that northern region where the brown is watering. And we went out and we did several types of assessments. We considered the salinity level, we considered the tidal changes, we considered whether or not certain areas would have been easily accessible for those who would have been coming out to help us with the outplanting. And then we also tried our best to identify seed sources in the area, but also looking at whether or not we needed to identify areas that we should have focused on in the initial stages of the planting. And then we were also considering who was in the mangrove area. Were there any birds? Were there crabs? Who would have been great indicators for natural hydrology for the area. And here you can see my colleague Leah Forbes during one of the site assessments, who would have been looking at salinity levels, water flow, the drainage, all of these things we were really considering at the beginning before we did any larger outplantings that involve tens of community volunteers. So our first outplanting, although we did so many assessments prior to introducing groups to the outplanting, this is one where even though we had 6 months of planning, I wanted to show you this slide because we used it as a good example of a teachable moment where this planting did not go well at all. Although we had looked at the tidal changes to that area, we still did not consider the fact that the tidal changes would have really had a quick turnaround and impacted the way that we were planting. And so we used that as a teachable moment. Like I said, we went back out during many different times of the tides to determine which would have been best. We paid attention to the hours in between the tidal changes to see if there would be any significant changes, which would have prevented us from planting. And then we made better use of maps and navigation tools to help guide us a little bit better. And this is an example of one of the maps that we use where we kind of identified keys. And from those keys, we said how many mangrove propagules or seedlings we were going to plant on each one of those keys. And then based on the tide, how many we would have been able to successfully execute and plant with good practices. One of the things that we were conscious of and adamant about was really engaging the community before any outplanting. We focused a lot on the mangrove education and building that awareness so that when people came there, they really felt a sense of ownership. They felt like they knew what the importance of mangroves were. They were coming into a nursery that we were building. They were seeing the changes from that propagule stage to seedling stage, where it was just a pencil-like shape, to where they were budding leaves, and being able to see the ball of the root, to really have a sense of ownership for the mangroves that they were going to be planting out. And we did this with many groups of people, forestry unit, the school groups, the church groups, and then we also engaged Mangrove Action Project before we did any of our plantings, to really promote sustainable practices and create that sense of education as we were moving through our mangrove restoration. Many different pillars of it, where it included that assessment, it included the training of the community, going out there, making sure all of the school groups knew what we were doing, how they can be involved, why mangroves were needed, engaging government, engaging local NGOs to partner with us, but also making sure that everybody was mindful of why the need for restoration and planting was important for the Dover Sound area. Also considering that we also needed to focus on other things like hydrology and natural regeneration, but why in the first instance planting was necessary. And so the entire community of Grand Bahama knows Mangrove Mania. Even though this would have been a waterkeepers project with his partners, we kind of tagged the name Mangrove Mania to really make it attractive for people who want to be involved. And we were very transparent in what it is that we wanted from the community, how we wanted them to be involved, and the things that they would have needed to be comfortable as they were assisting us with the mangrove outplanting. And then after all of the learning that we did from the first one, the second time we went out, it was so well executed to the point even the dogs felt comfortable planting. So this was like the perfect example of how mistakes can help to build a stronger model in the future if we just use those as teachable moments. We really focus on mimicking nature. So this picture shows where there's a cluster of mangrove seedlings planted around the dead mangroves. And we really focused on that because we wanted the groups to know that we weren't trying to remove any of the dead mangroves. They were already sequestering carbon. We wanted to plant around the dead mangroves. We didn't want to plant in any straight lines or use any rulers or tools for measuring. There was no science to it other than knowing that we had already tested the carbon, not the carbon levels, salinity levels, pH levels. We had done all of that. We needed them just to mimic nature and plant the way that nature would have been planted before. And then we made it much easier for them. So using the keys, mapping it out, using PVC pipes, simplified PVC pipes and poles, color coordinating it where we know that the yellow group was going to the yellow poles, the red group was going to the red poles. Everybody knew exactly where they were going. And so on that day, even though we had a small cluster of mangroves that we were tagging, and we had teams that went out, we had somebody who was a planter, a digger, data collector. Everybody knew their role. So the community, prior to coming to the planting, knew exactly who would have been the ones who were going to be digging the holes, who were going to be planting, who were going to be collecting the data. They knew that prior to, and they got some trainings afterwards. So they knew that we wanted to be able to go out and monitor in the future. So those data collectors were very vigilant in tagging the mangrove seedlings so that when we go out to do other assessments and data collection, we know exactly where to find them. And so on this day, we were fortunate to be able to plant 10,000 mangroves on that day. It wasn't a million. We really stressed to our funders that the large numbers are attractive, but it was impossible for us to wrap our minds around it. We planted 10,000. We were happy about that. And the community of Grand Bahama, which included over 150 volunteers, really helped us to get to that point. And so this is us really celebrating the 10,000th mangrove that we planted on that day. And here is the group of community members who knew the importance of mangroves, who knew what we were doing at Dover Sound, who bought into the idea of mangrove restoration, why planting was needed, why different types of planting, whether it be clusters, mound planting, individual planting, seed dispersals needed to be incorporated into this restoration project. And here are the groups of people who all made it possible for us to do that planting. But prior to those planting days, we looked at what Dover Sound was prior to 2019, and then we looked at what it was after 2019. And so here it is. But we did something that was very important, and that was before any of the outplantings, we did several test sites. And so in April 2022, along with Mangrove Action Project, we tagged a few test sites where we planted clusters of seedlings. And this is where we were still trying to figure out the title changes, but we still were able to plant some of the test clusters. And here is just an illustration of the progress that it has made over the period of time. And so this always warms my heart to see the growth of these seedlings from what they were when we planted them in April to what they are now in March 2023. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Just thinking about the island of Grand Bahama, there are 10,000 hectares of mangroves that were damaged during Hurricane Dorian. So it's going to take a lot. It's going to take more than 150 people. It's going to take many different methods of planting, consideration of hydrology and other aspects to really bring back this area. But we are excited about the long-term partnerships that we have with the community of Grand Bahama in executing this project so far. So I thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity just to introduce this project to you, and hope that you would be willing to follow us through as we continue.